Show us, I'll start streaming. Alright, our event's starting. This is regarding 365 Live, and we are here to talk to Cardinova, Simon Denton, and Stephen Collier. Hey, we're talking to people from the UK this time. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
I know we often do these shows where it's at crazy hours, and it's fine for the US. Australia should be in bed, but maybe isn't. And finally, we're connecting with some of our other peeps in Europe. So, how are you guys?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks, Daryl. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, well, we don't have summer over here, so we're watching you guys all having your summer holidays, and I understand, Steve, you're back from that. So yeah, thanks for joining us from your break. Simon, did you get a holiday yet?
Not yet. Holiday soon after this one, but yeah. So in honour of this, the UK broadcast, red, white, and blue on here. So just to make sure that.
Well, since we're talking clothes, hey Steve with his Skype T-shirt as well. Let's also sort of name the teams or the sides. And I know it was interesting how this formed, but we've got Simon. You're pretty keen on talking about stay where you are on Skype at the moment, and Steve is wearing the Skype T-shirt, but is arguing the Teams case. Now, Steve, your T-shirt looks like it's fresh out of the packet.
Yeah, I thought I'd need to take the opportunity to wear it at least once before we fully replace Skype with Teams. Yeah.
What's the upgrade path? Is it you're going to kind of burn it on the way or something, or
the T-shirt?
Yeah. I think can you just dye them? Do you think that would work? Just like a
purple, kind of bit of bleach through it, and it'll go a bit pinky purple.
Yeah, well, I know that it's built off a different stack, but we know Skype Broadcast is still a big piece of live events. Maybe the Teams is just a vest that goes over the top of the Skype T-shirt.
Yeah, so just mark it up, Sharpie. That'll do it.
High-vis purple vest. Well, okay, guys. Look, to get things going, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? Skype and moving to Teams. And we know that there is a story already, which I guess was talked about at Ignite last year. They really wanted to get out this path of how to move and what's required and what are you giving up and all those sorts of things. So we'll talk about all that today. But for those on the call that are probably still getting familiar with what Teams is and sort of understanding its position with Skype, let's first of all talk about Skype. Simon, you're on the Skype side. Tell us about it. What is it, and what was its history?
Oh, history, man. You link communicator. Anyway, they're before my time. They're before my IT life, I guess. So Skype, super lightweight way of being able to pick up a headset, call someone, talk to someone, instant message with them, share your screen. Really simple way of communicating, right? It's almost like the smartphone for your desktop PC, and then a mobile app that would also allow you to communicate and stay in touch without stress. And it's really easy. I mean, to give you an idea how easy Skype was, we rolled out Skype about 3 and a bit years ago to an office that we were completely super nervous about. They'd used handsets for making their calls. The whole idea of headphones we thought was going to be a real big nightmare. But actually, Skype was so super easy that when we moved these 300 people from one office to another and gave them all headsets, the fear didn't happen. They just put the headsets on, they started talking, they started communicating. There was no complications, there was no clutter. They could see specifically what they needed to do. I need to talk to someone, I call. I want to IM someone, I can IM. Really super simple and easy. That is Skype. Skype's job is to unify the communications. That's what it does.
Yeah. Look, I remember Office moves before that sort of thing, and before IP telephony, and man, the patching of cables and who's at what desk, and that massive mess that was moving with Office. So yeah, definitely IP telephony in general has improved that experience. Steve, what's your experience been with Skype over the years? I know it was acquired by Microsoft, and then it felt like Link and Office Communication Server just got rebadged with Skype.
Yeah, I mean, the name was acquired, wasn't it? The product already existed inside Microsoft and has been there since. It's got a history going way, way back to OCS, Office Communication Server. And I think it was even an Exchange product. It was part of Exchange in its very first life. And it's been a fantastic product. And it's made huge moves forward as it's been moved into Office 365. My organization, we deployed 7,000 seats of Skype telephony last year. So moving fully away from anything on premises, everything into the cloud phone system. Again, really great product. We put a lot of effort into adoption, into training people. But the product has been spectacularly successful. And it's once an org moves to Skype, it doesn't take long for you to get to that point where users forget what life was like beforehand. They forget you look at a phone, you think, what, you're going to pick up that and press buttons of numbers? What's even that about anymore?
What's this motion? What's this motion? Just wait while I... Yeah.
My phone number is my email address. How easy is that, right? So you only need to give one way of getting hold of you, right? And unified presence, they can just look you up in a big direction. Oh, there you are, can find you, right? It's easy peasy. And it's just simplicity, a simple way and a beautiful way to communicate is Skype.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
So and Skype itself was built off a really standardized framework of SIP with loads of extensions then on top of that. But that's really where almost that journey is starting to reach the end. And as we're going to talk about Teams, that's really why this isn't just yet another rename. I mean, Skype has renamed itself lots of times. Teams is a new start, bringing some functionality forward, but a lot of it is new.
Well, and before we get into talking about Teams, it isn't all rosy and peachy, isn't it, in the Skype world? There are some common phrases we hear, some common actions and motions we go through with Skype calls. Sorry, did you mute your microphone on purpose, Simon, just to illustrate?
I did, yeah, because the UI won't pop up saying, hey, you're muted and you're jabbering away, so you can see someone's mouth running, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you hear me now? Is also pretty popular.
Yeah.
And can you see my screen? Yeah.
Let me know when you can see my screen. There's always, it's going to take that mysterious 20 to 30 seconds before your screen appears for other users.
Yeah, yeah.
I think another key one that, while the instant messaging in Skype is something we're all used to, it doesn't work the same as instant messaging in other products. It doesn't. It's not the same concept as using WhatsApp or as using Facebook or any other product. It's these sort of short conversations. Now, if you like that, it's great, but it's just not the same as what other platforms are used to. Try sharing a file with someone over Skype and making that work successfully. That's just a weird experience these days.
There are a number of dependencies, aren't there, to make sure that firewall ports are open, your network is all happy-go-lucky to receive all that. So you do have to get a number of things going to make sure that that collaborative experience within Skype is good. Going back to the can you hear me now, can you see my screen, let me fill dead air while my screen does load. The other phrase like, you can't hear anything, you can't see anything, rejoin, reboot the world. So these are all things that we are used to. And, to be fair, we're used to across some other online meeting platforms too, aren't we? Skype has been a good tool, but it hasn't always been as reliable as we need it, and hasn't always given us the true collaborative experience that we want. Got a question before we start talking about Teams, though, too. How many do you find the use or adoption of the webcams to be popular in your organizations?
So what we find is very large numbers of users just won't turn on their camera. And there's just I'm one of those guys who always turns it on and then tries to shame other people into doing it, trying to be all kind of collaborative. And the excuses you hear about hair and angles and stuff like that is always just
yeah.
Pajama. Yeah, it's always just seems incredible to me. One thing we have done is we've got our room system devices don't give you the option not to. So video comes on from rooms, and that's a big advantage into meetings.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work that's gone into room systems from vendors to make that meeting experience simple. Walk into a room, I can see my meeting on the screen, I tap that meeting, it starts everything, and we're good to go. Does that always happen?
What are you fishing for there, Daryl? Yeah, of course it doesn't, right? 99% of the time you walk in, you push a button, the room system fires up into life and it's all good. But when it goes wrong with pretty spectacular fashion. But also you still get that one person who's joining remotely who can't hear the audio or can't see the screen that's been shared. You still have the person who's got the camera, covered up with a bit of blue tack or something, so it doesn't work. But the thing about Skype, to kind of round this off, right, so we can talk about the other stuff. The thing about Skype, without Skype, this door wouldn't have been open, right? The Teams door wouldn't have been open, right? And the WhatsApp world wouldn't have been around, the Casellas, the Facebook workplace stuff, all of that is been made a lot easier by the world using Skype beforehand, right? And for it.
And Skyping, certainly in my organisation, it's a verb. It's I'll Skype you. This is my Skype address. Click, send me a Skype message. We're going to talk about Teams. Teams doesn't have. That doesn't sound right.
Doesn't have the same ring at all.
Sort of unhealthy.
I'll Teams you. Wait, so you're going to form a team out of me, with me?
And I think that the Skype brand has been successful in the consumer space. I know it's maybe not as strong as it once was in the consumer space, but people know what it means when you say to Skype somebody. It's got the same recognition. I think WebEx probably is about the same recognition, but either way, WebEx you probably wouldn't expect to see video, I guess, maybe just screen sharing. But it's absolutely a ubiquitous term, and it's been a fantastic product. But all good things come to an end.
So Teams, Microsoft Teams, the next evolution of this type of communication. How have you been describing it to your people as you've brought it into your organisations, or maybe if you're talking to other fellow peers or colleagues out in the community? How would you describe Teams?
So I start by talking about Teams as simplification, as kind of, how we've been rolling out all this great Office 365 functionality to you, and it got a bit confusing. We had Skype, we had groups, we have SharePoint sites, we have Yammer, we have great long list, and everyone wants you to say, you always start and say, well, it's confusing. Could you just describe what all of them do to me so I can pick the right tool to use? And Teams is this opportunity to just say, there's just Teams. You use Teams. Whatever the question is, the answer is almost certainly Teams. There's a few exceptions, maybe Yammer, some other edges around there, but largely it pulls that all neatly together and provides the skin. I've heard Microsoft talk about it as the scaffolding of Office 365 that allows everything else to be presented to you. So whether that's your file sharing through what is behind all that, it's SharePoint, but you don't need to know that until you need that level of functionality. You've got your video in your meetings, which is the functionality that Teams has added in equivalent to Skype. You've got your instant messaging and chat functionality, which is sort of reinvented from the ground up. You can embed your planner, your other apps, your SharePoint pages, and a whole host of third-party products as well to give you that one context. Here's my team. Here's everything we need to do our job. I don't need to go think where it is. I just go into Teams, and there it is, and I'll find it all from there. So I think the main message is about taking away the complexity of Office 365 into just being one product and one answer.
Yeah, we'll use a similar description, right? It's just the place where you get work done, right? It's the place that focuses you. When I'm talking about it, I kind of liken it to a racehorse with its blinkers on, right? It can't quite see what's on the rest of the world. It allows you to focus. It takes up all of your real estate. The distractions are not there. So yeah, we describe it as a place where you get work done, where you can obviously communicate and collaborate seamlessly. And again, and the simplicity story, right? You didn't need to worry about the complications of what's under the hood. You can just focus on doing your things, right? And that's how we deliver the message too. But it's tempered the fact it's delivered as a collaboration product. This is where you collaborate to do things, either collaborate through voice or through messaging or working on something. And I think that is the big differential, because people are used to a small, slimline little box where they're going to communicate either in through typing or speech, or occasionally with the old whiteboard if they actually use the whiteboard, right? It's a lot more than that, and that's what leads to its complexity. So even though you say this is the place where you can get your work done, but it's more than just a glorified purple telephone, and that's where some of the difficulties come in.
Yeah, no, I do like how you both describe it as the place to get work done. And like you say, there has been, and still is, this conversation of what to use when, but there was this dream, and it was talked about a few Ignites ago, or a few conferences ago, about, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to think about what product we were using, but we would just go in and do an activity and get work done. We will have a conversation. We will work on files together. We will do something, and we won't think about, oh no, which product should we use at this point? And I like how Teams brings that team together, the people you're working with. You're focused on that work. You've got everything around you, and it's all centered around that conversation. So it is the next evolution, as they say, of Skype and of that style of communication. The other thing, of course, it's persistent, right? So the only other reliable, persistent communication we had was an email or a forum. And you could go there and see
Skype's persistent. Skype's persistent. Yeah, people just call persistent chat is the fact that the object, the message you're talking about doesn't get vaporized after 60 seconds, right? That is in-persistent chat on your right? Everything else that you see is persistent. It's there. It's in Skype. It's an email. It's an email group. It's in WhatsApp. It's all the same. The chat is there, right? It persists. So I think the persistent chat selling point is not the thing, right? No. It's just easier to get to the chat history, right? You're not right clicking on continue conversation. You're not going to Outlook to see that actually this is where the conversation history is stored to store it, right? That level of persistency has been improved, and it's just there. You switch over to the person you were chatting to before, and everything you've talked about before is there. That's persistent, but it's no different to the other persistent.
Hey Simon, if we were having a chat and I shared a file with you in Teams, that would be there persistently in the Teams conversation. In Skype, it's that point-to-point file transfer and whenever you put it.
So that's not collaboration. It's persistent chat and persistent collaboration.
It's I know where, hey, I can remember I was talking to Simon about that. I'll go, and that's what I want to go and find, that full thing. And yeah, you're right. There's that sort of weird hidden in your email folder with these strange sort of messages around each conversation that sort of start and stop in slightly odd timings and stuff like that. Then inconsistency in terms of, hey, I want to start chatting with you in Skype now and then pick it up on my mobile. I never got that at work. This is not a thing that flows neatly between different devices. They've tried and they put a huge amount of work into it, but it's never really achieved that same experience, which is why other products start creeping into enterprises. WhatsApp is not just a consumer product. Lots of organizations use it as well. They may not intend to, but iMessage, WhatsApp, all those products are different, and it is important. It is what people look for.
So we're going to probably come across these little differences and poking the bear discussions as we go. But as we sort of turn our thinking towards the topic of when to shift, if to shift, what is that shifting journey like when you want to move your org from Skype to using Microsoft Teams? The recent discussion, it was put out at Inspire. We have reached feature parity. And like, this is one of the questions that people have is like, well, if I'm going to move to Teams, what is my motivation to move my organization? What is it over here that we want that makes it good for us to move, and what are we leaving behind? So, what does that story look like for you guys at the moment? Do you feel that there's parity? There's a good reason to move now? Is it a smooth journey? What happens there?
So I think so. It was interesting that they made that announcement, or it was reported from Inspire, rather than there being a specific sort of blog post or big announcement about it. And I think, and the reality behind that is that there's still stuff that's rolling out, and we've been seeing them work incredibly fast on a catch up between Teams and Skype capability over the last since Ignite last year, where they announced their roadmap. They are pretty much there, but not everyone's quite got it just at the moment. Microsoft's rollout thing is I can't fathom how complicated it is to roll those things out on the enterprise scale they do. But it is happening. It'll depend exactly where people's tenants are in terms of exactly which functionality. I'm sure Microsoft are going to come out and talk much more clearly about what is and isn't there, what's coming in the future, what's changing. But I think that this is the point where they set themselves a list. They picked the features of Skype, which they said were the sort of unnegotiable things we need to replicate. And they worked through that like Trojans, ticking off feature by feature. We can now do that. And so they've now reached this point. And I think the word parity is a really awkward word, I think, for a lot of people, because it doesn't mean that every feature of Skype is in Teams. It's most of the features that people use most of the time are now there in Teams. There's still a whole load of stuff that still isn't there. It might not ever be there. What Microsoft are now in the stage is, right, so we've got this base core level of functionality sorted out. What do we go and do next? And that next stuff will depend on people's demands. And some of that might be features that are currently only just in Skype, but some of it might be completely new, separate ideas. And we're just starting to see the edge of some of that big idea stuff. We saw it at Build early this year, where they demoed these meetings of the future. All of that is the stuff that will be competing with the remains of the Skype functionality to kind of come across. But in terms of a calling platform, in terms of a meeting platform, and in terms of chat, for certain organizations, Teams has got what you need. Now, Teams still has some, still isn't going to ever be an on-premises solution. So, many organizations, largely because of network and infrastructure and integration issues, need their telephony environment to work inside their organization. That's not going to change. There's a new version of Skype Server out, which is really just keeping support running on it. It's not going to get any better, but it's just going to last as long as people need it. But if you're not in that category, if you can move yourself, particularly if you can move to cloud-based, if you were using Skype for Business Online, Teams is pretty much there for both calling, telephony, meeting functionality. It's pretty cool. There's also a really good story of interop between Skype and Teams to allow you to transition between there. It's perhaps one of the most complicated bits to understand and get right, and few people will have tried it so far. But once you do get it working, it works pretty nicely. Still got a few rough edges, but it's pretty much getting there.
Simon, what do you think's missing? What would your advice be around the move and when?
Sure, yeah. So there's a couple angles to this, right? And I guess the first one is is whether your organisation is actually ready to take this on, because some people will describe this as a simple change. I don't. You think about this, right? If you look in the message center, there's probably been about 100 feature updates that have landed on your users from Office 365 in the last 6 months. There's probably been at least 1 or 2 new builds of Office that they've been subjected to in that period, and probably even Windows, right? So what we've got is this environment of change fatigue, right? The user base, stop it. Stop changing what I'm doing. And the thing where Teams is at the moment is that they're still just finishing off their wish list, right? Of the things they think we need. Not, I would argue, not all the things we actually need. So they are still moving stuff around. So when you're rolling something like Teams out to them, they're going, there's more change. And like the Teams client, if it's on one of the quicker development rings, it will change like weekly, right? And some little thing will move from one place to another. I think you've got to make a really big decision around how change fatigued your organization is, right? And how change ready they are before you do this. But you then also need to plan, think the Skype story is going to end, right? There is out here, whenever it is, 2020 something or whatever, that cliff face will be there, and a change, you'll have to make that change, right? Whatever you're doing. So do you jump in early with this, with some specific workload, get in early, understand it, get all your infrastructure sorted, so you're not up against this virtual cliff face, which it will come maybe a few years down the track, but you'll be doing it on your terms. So you really need to kind of work through that process. Yes, there are some killer features that are completely missing from, you know, attendant console in Teams, right? You've got a receptionist who's fielding all your calls coming into your central number. How are you going to do that in Teams, right? In fact, how you do that in Skype, because you're falling back to link attendant still, right, to kind of do those workloads for you. PABX type situations, you know, PSTN calling and all that kind of thing, that's all still in relative, you know, we're trying some of that out. You know, if your telephony provider isn't Microsoft at this point in time, you know, this is still a new world, right? The Tata Communications of the world are still rolling out the hardware and infrastructure to support this behind the scenes. But I think all that's going to finish, and I think we're going to come to Ignite later this year, and I think the messaging is going to be pretty aggressive at that point. You know, you've got everything you need. What is now stopping you, right? And I think the thing that's going to be stopping you is your user base. I think that's the thing that you really put the brakes on this process. Until you get that switch in Teams, which I do hope it comes, when you can just do the communication switch. So you're just moving the client over to from UC to IC mode. You know, to decide one's called intelligent communications and one, you know, the unify. If you can do that switch, I think that's going to really help the adoption journey. That will reduce a lot of the friction around, I've got to learn all these new features and I've got to do some SharePoint stuff behind the scenes, and that'll get rid of all that stresses. You can focus on your network, your telephony, and then you can focus on taking a journey that your user base on a simple journey, which is your IM button used to be here, now it's here. It used to be light grey, and it used to be dark and visible, and now it's light grey. And if it's on a light background, you're hardly going to see it, but it's going to be in the top right-hand corner when you float your mouse there, right? That is the thing, the journey you need to go through.
Yeah, it's definitely a consideration, a huge consideration, is your user base, whether they are ready to shift, and what does it take to get them across that line. I think power users and IT pros kind of underestimate the, while we've talked about the simplicity, go to one place and get your work done, it is also this new environment to learn. And when people are still, in some cases, struggling with the concept of, my documents are in a OneDrive, and I can access them from here and here, and so how do I save again from Word to these places? Yeah, it's interesting. Teams, in some ways, depending on how you look at it, makes it easy to do if you're just going to be browser/team based. But there's still that story of how people currently work and transitioning that knowledge across. Someone got a fire alarm in the background.
Yeah, that's me.
Do you have to leave?
Letting your toast.
No,
it's just cooking.
Oh, okay. All burning. Yeah. So, Mark, Stephen, you can talk, I guess, a little about that journey that your org has chosen to go all in with Teams. But how did you get to that point where you thought, yes, we're ready to do it? What was ready for you?
Yeah. So we're not there yet, but we're starting the journey, and we're just at the point where enough features are lighting up inside the product to allow us to get there. And up until now, there's been gaps, there's been features that are missing. Now, partly it depends on. I think there's a major thing, particularly for larger organizations, to think about whether your network infrastructure is ready for cloud-based audio, video, and communication. There's a general trend, I would say, in enterprises to move away from, to move to having more local broken out internet connections, and to remove all these sort of nasty gubbins like proxies and stuff like that will slow down your communication. But that's really essential. You're not going to get far unless you've got good, reliable connectivity. The weird thing is, and because we went through all of this, is that the performance of your network and your connection to the internet makes all the difference. The internet itself is never the slow point. And that's sort of counterintuitive to most network people. And particularly your network teams will think, well, you're not going to have quality of service across the internet, are you? It would be great if we got it to the edge of our network. That would be the important bit, because that's where we see the bandwidth issues there. So if you're already in that position, if you're getting into that position, which we're fortunate to be heading in that direction already, and we already adopted a telephone system in the cloud that made that, proved that level of functionality.
You were already using Skype telephony, weren't you, as you said earlier?
Yeah. So then, use the C Teams. You don't hold it back, even if you're not going to use it for your meeting capability. I'm sure, you'll have shown it to them. You'll probably be trying to convince some Slack users to move off Slack and onto Teams instead. All of that stuff, all that great collaboration functionality inside Teams. It then just becomes the natural. Okay, so I can now take away one more tool from my user. I can replace the Skype button with a Teams button. Can I make that work inside my meeting rooms? If you're using Microsoft products in your meeting rooms, Surface Hubs and Skype Room systems, the update's now just about out. They're all on SRS. Surface Hubs are inside a preview at the moment, but coming real soon. Then you can just sort of almost just flick across your meeting experience there. The big concern will be when you start working with other organizations. No company works on their own. Going early, you'll be coming across many other organizations who won't be Teams-only organizations and won't be used to joining a Teams meeting at this stage.
If I can jump in there and say that is a key piece, that while Skype is sometimes not reliable for bringing people in externally, it is there, and it works in all browsers. Right, so this is where I think this is one thing that we're still waiting for, why I struggle to invite other people to external meetings. If I know they don't have a Teams client, the only browser that supports the audio and video at this stage, when you want them to be able to participate with their audio and video fully, is Edge, isn't it? You don't get that full experience in Chrome or in Firefox.
Yeah, and so in Chrome you get audio and screen sharing, but not video yet. Receiving screen sharing, not sending it. But it wasn't really the case in Skype. With Skype you had to install the meeting plugin, and many organizations, ours included, won't allow you to install third-party bits of software onto your PC to join those kind of meetings. With Teams, both with Chrome and with Edge. Edge just doesn't have the market share, so it's probably not worth talking about too much. But Chrome, you can just join that purely in the browser, nothing to install, hear, speak, see what the people are sharing with you. It's a little unintuitive. If you do need the add-in, if you do need to have, you're not using one of those browsers, you're stuck in IE11 or some other ghastly environment like that, then the Teams app is also your viewer. So you don't need to, you can download the Teams app and just use it just to join meetings. You don't need to actually have a login. It's just a meeting client as well.
Good point.
But yeah, but there is it's also that familiarity. Many organizations around the world are using Skype and Skype meetings. If you invite them to a Skype meeting, they just know what to do. It'll be quite some time before, every org gets used to seeing click a Teams meeting link and then the experience will be different. And the two don't interrupt. There's no meeting, Teams meetings are Teams meetings and Skype meetings are Skype meetings. There's never going to be a joint Teams and Skype meeting.
Yeah, and that's part of the painful sort of onboarding story, right? The rehoming of meetings that have all been created in Skype to Teams. That's part of the difficult journey there. There's some licensing nuances that also need to go on, right? Because be a guest in someone else's team, for example, you have to go back to your system administrator in your organization to throw some switches and stuff. So it's not as smooth an experience at the moment to kind of use extended features of Teams. You'll be able to pick up a headset and talk to them if it's a modern headset that's got the right sort of built-in driver support with it. Also, you're going to get struggles with the mute controls, which I know they're kind of working on. But you have an older generation headset, and you try and press mute in Teams, and Teams just go there, not listening to you, right?
But you don't want it to listen to you. That's the point. You're trying to mute it. I'm not listening to you.
Exactly. But that's going to get better over the next couple of months, right? So your decision point is: do you want to go with some of this lumpier stuff and work through the journey and do it? I would say on your own timeline and at your own pace, or do you have to think 2019, 2020, 2021? I'm going to really have to pick up the pace here. I'm going to have to get this all sorted in shorter order.
Well, can I ask too, like for you guys are both considering this for your people, is it a good strategy, a useful strategy that those who do want to go all in Teams, can they live and work completely in that environment and also coexist successfully with those who stay on Skype? What are they missing in that story?
I think it really comes down to the user cohort that you do that with. I think if they're pretty comfortable and they don't get too annoyed with the flick flack between doing some stuff in Skype and doing some stuff in Teams, if they're comfortable with that, then that's fine. But actually, if they just want to get stuff done and they don't want to think, actually, no, okay, I'm over here for this kind of person, I'm over there, I need to set up the right meeting in the right location. You don't do it right, and you'd kill the product. Before.
And you need to get out of islands mode. So Teams has these coexistence modes that you can set for an individual user or set for your tenant. And the default for reasons of history is this mode called islands, which kind of just keeps Teams in Teams and Skype in Skype, and never the two shall meet. And they're two separate environments. And that's the worst thing for users. Look, I'm going to get messages here as well as there now. I'm going to have stuff in both places. That's a really, really complicated experience. There is now, most people should now be seeing a Teams only mode and a Skype for Business only mode as well. There are two other modes coming. One called Teams collaboration mode, where Teams will turn off its meetings and calls functionality and just provide you collaboration. And then the other one will be collaboration and meetings, but leaving chat and calls in Skype. These modes, when you start flicking them on, that's when the interop starts happening between Teams and Skype. So if you're in Teams only mode and someone on Skype sends you a message, they don't need to know anything about which client you're using. You'll receive it in Teams. You reply back to them, they'll see it in Skype. You call them in Teams, they call you. All of that journey works. The meetings are still one or the other, but that once you get to that level of being Teams only, it suddenly makes an awful lot more sense. There are still, like any interrupts, there are still limitations. Going from multi-party calls or single calls to an escalation, you start discovering quite how complicated the beast Skype actually is under the covers, or how many features it's really got there. But you can get a pretty good life now. I sit in Teams only mode, and it's actually quite refreshing to only have one client. I get absolutely, like Simon says, that that Teams having to only one window and having to convert that window to be my chat as well as my every other functionality rail is pretty annoying. And I know they've heard that. I know we should all keep voting for that on user voice, because it's kind of one of the biggest frustrations from a user point of view, I think.
Yeah, and that's definitely the thing. It's Teams. Yeah, I would say Teams is ready to, as long as you can kind of embrace the journey. Yes, there are going to be some bumps. Like the three of us tried to have a Teams call before this call, right? And we tried to all do it out of the Teams mobile client, right? Daryl could ring Stephen, but could he bring me in? No, right? So there's going to be those kind of lumps and bumps along the way. So what we're doing as part of our rollout strategy, and what we kind of recognise, is we're doing the piloting with some pretty big cohorts to stress it, some geographically diverse groups and teams. So we're going to stress the networks and things, with a view that we exit this pilot, that we don't go into this islands mode, right? Or if we do, we're only going to go into it for about 2 weeks. So the main cohort, the main 16,000 people, don't have to have the pretty crappy experience of fighting between the two different systems we're working out. We can be very quick and clear and go, right, we're going to cut this thing over, and it's going there, and it's done, right? You're not going to get that confusion. So that is certainly our rollout approach, and that's how we've been doing it. And so we're just kind of finessing some of the PSTN stuff behind the scenes to make sure that works. We've got all the direct internet connectivity, that's all kind of sorted. So that's the last thing. We're kind of testing that process now. We're going to put another 300 odd people on it very soon, and they'll stress it. That last stress test, we'll run them in islands, we'll cut them over pretty sharp, make sure we understand that process completely before we then go big with everyone else.
Well, that's a great place to round it out, to say that this is a way to make that journey, and you've given some good real world examples of why to do that and when, and I like how you've spoken about the island mode too. We don't want that to be a confusing journey for our end users, because as you pointed out, Simon, that's probably the biggest lag part of this journey. The technology is almost there. Parity is the word. Meeting rooms are catching up. Eventually people orgs will change that VGA projector on the roof there as well, and upgrade their meeting room equipment. But for the most part, the vendors are supporting Teams as a system for their equipment too. So yeah, thanks guys for joining me. I know it's getting into the evening there and early morning here. Thanks for those of you who joined us on the live stream too. And we'll check in with you guys again. I think it's good to be able to flick the camera and the streams around to the other side of the world, and I think this time works well for all of us. So we are a diverse team, aren't we, at Regarding 365? We're kind of everywhere, so we can't get everyone together unless we're actually physically together. So that was it regarding 365. Thank you, Stephen Collier. Thank you, Simon Denton. And do tune in again. The next webcast we've got is going to be about a week away. We're looking at Microsoft Whiteboard, talking with Ian Mikatel and March Rogers. They're from the product group at Microsoft working on that. And excited also to say that Louise Fries, the official sketch noter for Microsoft Ignite, is going to join us in the whiteboard. She'll have some questions, but she's also going to be sketch noting the session as we start talking about this stuff. So tune into that, and thanks again, guys. We'll see you again. Bye for now.